Welcome in, everyone. This is our weekly flow alerts recap from the week of 9/30/2024 to 10/4/2024. This video is being made on Sunday, 10/6. So we're going to kind of go over the flow that was called out, kind of what stuck out on the flow, and go over the results of everything that came out. So this is our weekly list here of flow that came in, and for those who are newer, I do post these in my Discord, so this is just kind of how they look for those looking. I look through the flows they come in. Obviously, you can see everything coming in here. So this is our flow that we're going to kind of go over. Again, always posted in here. I have my bid side stuff, and we have our flow and chart section. So we have different from our hottest contracts that I go over, the flow that I like with the good setups. So let's get started here. So first up on Monday, we had PDD puts. So again, this is going to show a negative 3 days to expiration just because they're expired. But let's take a peek at the flow and how that came in. So this whale opened these actually at 102 per contract here. So these hitting same day, a high of 214. So that's a 109% return on these. And here is our 930. You can see all that volume on the day. This whale more than likely cut a lot of this same day around the ask and the bid here. You can see that lower carryover here. So that was a good winner to start the week. Again, 102 to 214 intraday there on the PDD 10/4 130 puts. So moving on here next, we had some bid side Mara calls. So bid side, they're selling these calls, and this is how we know this. So here's our whale entry here at 0.30 per contract, and let's look at the actual flow. So how do you know they're selling these? Again, we don't 100% know, but again, IV's kind of staying the same here. First thing I'll look at, and we're getting filled at the bid. So this is more than likely a sell. Everything being filled at the bid, and looking at this, so these filled at 30. Contracts hit a low of 10 on 10/3. So that whale collecting about 66% of that premium there. And again, 930, you can see all that coming in, carrying over. Looks like they're still in. Again, with selling calls, they're looking to collect that premium on those contracts. So they're looking for the contracts to depreciate, essentially. Now let's move on here to WULF. We had, again, bid side calls on the 10/25 5.5 call. Interesting one here because they filled at 0.25, got all the way down to about 0.15 here, and collected about 40% of that premium. But then Friday we had that big spike in these. So interesting to see what happens with this one. Looks like that whale's still in, but at the time, whale collected about 66% of that premium from 0.30 to 0.10. Whale still in. Can do what you want with that information. And moving on here, next we had GME, little longer dated contract here, 35 call on the 117 expiration. And this, again, anything GameStop, AMC is going to be a gamble, I'd say. But these coming in at 250 and actually hitting a high of 283 same day. So these hit about 17.43% here, which is a good trade for a meme stock. And again, I always like adjusting up stops to secure that. And I won't dive super deep into the flow on this one just because it's a gamble essentially, but looks like they probably took some off the table here at about 257. And let's take a peek here. So this was 9:30. Yeah, it looks like they probably took some of that off intraday there. Just with that amount of volume carrying in over to open interest here. But contracts still hitting about 17.5% there. Moving on next. And this was a public piece of flow that was posted. We had TIGR 117.6 calls. This was an absolute amazing piece of flow. Entry here at about 103.1, hitting about 670 or a high of 710 on 10-4. These hitting a max return of 610%. Very nice, easy trade here. And obviously China contracts, China contracts seeing a lot of action this week. China talking about cutting their rates, so that helping with that. And let's take a look at the flow. Again, this is very good flow. This is a good example of buying flow. Again, you can see that IV coming up here. IV increases all the way up. Even though we get some bid side, you can see that IV is still going up. And again, that spot price is increasing as well. And we're on the ask side of a higher bid-ask spread. This is textbook buying flow. And again, just kind of see how that looks there. So and this is a good example of not all bid side flow means it's a sell, because you can see in that last example we had that IV continue to go up. So these running about 610%, and looks like that whale's still in. Probably took a little off Friday there though. So up next we have JKS, another China stock. Here is our entry, 175. Actually, I believe they got filled at 130. I have 130, but we'll change it here to 175. So 175, and these hitting a high of 470 on Friday for about 261%. Again, looking at that IV first, and with the flow alert rule on, these are repeated hits ascending fill, means that spot prices ascending or going up. So again, IV increasing, spot price increasing on the ask side of a higher bid-ask spread. Good signs that it's a buyer of the contracts. And you can see how that shot up. Moving on, next we had Uber. So the flow's a little messier here, but it looks like this whale may have took a loss at the end of the day. Interesting. But again, 9:30 was our entry, so here's all that volume carrying over. And this one got filled at 73, and these did hit a high of 217 on the 3rd. And a high of 217, that's 197% there. To me, this is kind of odd here with that candle on 10-2. So we had 34. Oh, that whale. Okay. Because we had, so you can see where this volume from 9:30 carries over. We have most of that carryover. 1,000 contracts traded that day. So they more than likely took some off on the 2nd here, because we only have 1,000 contracts carried on that day. So they probably took a big chunk of that off. They passed these contracts on to somebody else, it looks like, and then somebody sold for a loss. But this whale exited at about 108 from 73. Good trade for that whale. Again, hitting a high of 201 on the 3rd for a max return of 197%. Meta, this was a really nice one this week. This is from my flow and charts. Whale coming in here at 34.23 per contract, 26 per contract, hitting a high of 48.15 on Friday. these contracts running 40.54%. Very nice trade here for those that like bigger priced contracts. Again, here's that whale coming in on the 30th. See all that open interest continuing to stay there, most of that carrying over. And looking at the flow here, bump this out. So again, we have that repeated hits ascending fill. Again, IV increasing, drops a little bit there, but comes right back up. Again, seeing that ask side fill on a bigger spread. Looks like a buy to me. And here we are. Nice trade there on Meta. So moving on now to Tuesday, so 10-1 here. We had CCJ 10-18-46 puts. And this whale exited for a loss. So the whale filling is at 84, exiting at 34 for a loss. They cut at 59%, a 59% loss. And we'll be able to probably see this reflected tomorrow morning on 10-7, that this whale more than likely cut their position and this open interest should drop. So something to look at there, but this is a good example of a whale cutting for a loss. Here is your entry and here is your exit. So that one would be considered a loss. And looking at it, how it came in, again, a little more towards, I wouldn't say the middle, but not right at the ask. But if this whale indeed did cut, this would be, obviously the whale was bearish on CCJ. So moving on here, so that whale opened at 0.84, cut at 0.34. And again, this is why it's always good to have a risk management plan heading in, because whales are human too. They're gonna lose on trades. So moving on here, we had up next TQQQ on the 11-15-72 call. This one sitting at 491 was the entry. 597 hitting a high of 615 on Friday, giving us about 25.51% on those. And again, looking at the flow, IV stays up, jumps a little bit here, and coming close enough to where this is more than likely probably the same person, but again, seeing that ask side fill and contracts slowly moving up. So contracts are up about 25.5% right now, 490 to 615. And up next we have CVX. Here is our whale entry. Let's take a peek at the flow. So 25.13, jump in the IV right there. Higher bid-ask spread, seeing that's filled at the spot. Good premium, good size. Obviously not a lot on that chain already. And something I like to do when I do see open interest already, can always back it out just to make sure there's not another bigger trade here. And this is clearly an opening position. So that is our flow, and contracts hitting a high of 315 here on 10-3. Contracts hitting about 85.29%. Again, entry right here, 170 hitting 308 here, 315-ish. Well, see it right there, 315. So about 85.29% on those. And up next we had bid side IONQ puts. So a little further out. So again, they're selling these puts. They want them to go to zero essentially. Here is your whale. All that volume there, essentially most of it coming over into open interest there. You can see all that pretty much staying there. Looking at the raw flow. Good example of a person selling being filled at the bid side there. You see that IV dropping here as well too. Textbook selling flow. And these hitting a low of 59 on Friday. So whale collecting about 34% profits on 34% of that premium so far on that. Obviously longer time frame, so they're probably expecting it to stay flat or go up a little bit more before the end of that. All right, up next we had QQQ puts. This could have been a quick little scalp. So on 10-3, let me bump this back. So 10-3. These were weekly puts. I believe it actually came in on 10-1. Let me come back here. Look at that. What am I? Okay. So 10-1. Okay. So 10-1. Here's your whale. 207. These did hit 351 for a high. So that's about 26% on those. This is why you should always be adjusting up stops, because looks like the whale probably took some here at 172 from that entry, which would be a loss for that whale. But again, hitting 26%, a strategy I like to do every 10% I'm up. I like to at least put a stop on for break even, and every 5% or so adjust stops up. Again, a lot of brokers have trailing stops, which you can throw on, which should manually or automatically follow it up and help you secure profits and not let winning trades turn negative. So these hitting about 26.71%, 277 to 351, and we can see that. Or 3, where were we? 10-1, 386. So I'm actually hitting a high of 386, but I'm not going to change that. So LMT is next. So looking at this one, LMT 1018 650 call, and this whale looks like they're starting to cut for a loss, which is again another one that kind of blows my mind. Here's our flow. We have ask, no side, and it's going to be kind of goofy because it's back a little. So let's just go back and look at this. So here's our whale entry at 149. Actually, they entered at 160. I have it, but hitting a high of 248. That's 55% in one day. This whale should be adjusting up, because now look, it looks like we got more bid side coming in here, and they're selling these for a loss then, which this is where sometimes greed kicks in and can see your trades go to zero quick or even sell for a loss. This is why, again, I always like adjusting up, but these contracts hitting 55% same day. I mean, 9:30, and I'm Central Time again for those that don't know. So 9:30 up to 11:30 in 2 hours, these hit 55%. Should be adjusting up stops and being smart with that. So moving on, again, 160 to 248, 55% on those. All right, let's move on to our next one, which was RTX. So RTX here. Looks like this whale's still in. Let's take a peek at the flow. And usually once it starts to get a little deeper, here, let's take a peek. So 10-1. 10-1. And it's going to be goofy for me, so I'm just going to pass on that spot. But again, we can see that coming in here. Flow is majoritarily ask side volume. About 186 fill there. Contracts pretty much sitting a little above break even. I mean, running at about 192 right now. Whale has about 18 days on these. Looks like they're still in. Those only hitting about 9%, but whale's still in on those. Up next we had Baba, which was China flow, and we know how this performed this week. Here is our flow from 10-1, exiting here at 293, so 166% on those. Let's see if we can take a peek at this. Again, your repeated hits ascending fill, and I like having that on in the settings. You can just come up there, hit settings, turn on the show if applicable flow alert. So back out there, and again, see that IV come up. See that ask side spot being filled there. Whale again exiting 293, 166%. So PDD again, another good one. Your whale fills here at 293, right here, 292, 293, hitting a high of 610 on Friday. 610, or did we hit 627? 610 I've got. 610, so that's giving us about 108.19% on those. Looks like that whale's probably exiting there. And moving on here to our next one. TME, 74 days out. 12/20/14 call. Here's your entry. Again, most of that volume carrying over into open interest. Looking at the flow, IV stays up, ask side fills, and Wilson about break even here. So 74 days on those, whale at break even. Can't really digest that one with them sitting flat, no move made. So SPY puts, we had the 11/15/538 put. Whale coming in here at 590. Looks like they cut here at 499 and 468. So whale cutting these for, we'll go with the low end, 468. So whale cutting these for about a 13% loss. That's a decent sized loss that I would like. And we can easily see that here. That was all in the same day. All that volume, only 5,000 carrying over. We had 22,000 contracts filled there on the first candle, followed by 9,000, 9,500 there, and about 10,000 there. So that's where your math comes in for that. Whale cut same day for about a 13% loss. And we had up next more PDD flow. Again, here's your whale. 512 was the fill. Oops, I keep right clicking. So 512 was our fill on that. Contracts hitting 578 there. 562 and 631 for a high. So 631 there for a high, about 23%, but whale looks to still be in with more time, and with theta over the weekend, this will be interesting to see how that goes. Let's look at the flow. So again, good example here. You can see that IV lower here, but then we had our big whale come in. IV spikes. And we continue to move up with our IV. Drops a little bit there, but comes back up here. Seeing that ask side fill. Can assume buys. So these contracts hitting about 15%, 20%, just depending on what you got in at. HUM, this was a nice one because this was a good intraday move. So 413 on these. Actually, they filled, 413 on these. We can see it was a really quick trade because they hit a high of 634. Actually, they hit 860 that day. So up 413 to 836. That's 102% there. And that was a quick trade there too. Take a peek at the flow. Oh, not much to work with on that one. Okay, we will, it looks like this will be interesting to see what happened here. 302, and that'll be interesting to see if this is a double down or not, but not a lot of volume on this one. So AMD, this was a really interesting one because I'll show everybody here. So those hum contracts making about 100% move, a quick 100% move. So moving on to AMD, we had the 1011 185 call. So this one was really interesting because we had 12,000 contracts traded on the day. And this is a perfect example of a bid not always being a close. So here is our initial entry at 0.60 was the fill. And looking at that candle, pump these out. So again, when that flow came in, spike in that IV, we've got the ask side fills and some fills above the ask, which shows aggression. A lot of fills there at the ask and above the ask. We have our repeated hits ascending fill. But, so we can see the 3,000 contracts here. We have some bid side come in here after, and then more ask side. So, to me, and then we have the other big bid side candle come here too. So, between these first three candles, we have about, you can see that candle volume 3,557. We'll make it even, so 3,000 contracts plus, we'll say 13, so 4,400 contracts plus another 2,000. That's about 6,400 contracts. We see a big bid side candle of about 5,000 contracts come in. Very close, so this could look like an exit. Because if you stack these candles up on top of each other, it's going to about to very close to that. But look at our next day volume that carried over into open interest. Most of this volume from 10-3 carried over. And look what happened. This whale didn't exit. They bought back in at the bid and averaged down. These contracts hitting a high of 0.83 on Friday. These contracts ended up hitting 38%. So good trade, but if you would have followed just the candles, you may have exited for a loss. But contracts hitting about 38% there. And we also had some 1025 35 puts on SMCI. So again, here is our entry at 64, 65. Looking at the flow. Looking at the flow, here's our IV increasing. IV kind of comes up and drops a little bit there. Let's see. Okay, here's our flow. So again, lower IV, here we are, we have repeated hits coming in. IV spikes, seeing that ask side fill. IV continues to go up, ask side fills, IV going up. This is textbook flow. Then we had repeated hits descending flow come in, but when you look at it closer, this is where it comes in as descending. We dropped a penny on some contracts. We're still at the ask side here. So this is kind of where that time in the market, you can kind of tell this is still a buy. But yep, coming up here, that flow looks good. Small decrease here again, still being filled towards that ask side. IV comes back up, and we are looking good there. And these contracts hitting 64 and hitting a high of 90 on 10-4, so about 38% on the SMCIs. And we're getting towards the end here. CEG fills at 467, hitting a high of 608 on 10-4. 608. Here's our 608-ish here. So 608 on those, about 30.19% here. Looks like exits here, I would assume. We'll see that volume, how much of that volume on Friday gets taken off of the open interest. So about 30%, 467 to 608 on those. Let's take a peek at the flow. So again, repeated hits ascending fill. Can see that IV staying up. Seeing that ask side fill with that spot price. So spot price, that's just what they're filled at. Bid ask is the spread of the contracts. Up next, so this next flow is from Friday. So a lot of this not making a move yet, but we had ULCC call 10.18.6 calls. Bump this here. So again, 35 was the fill, actually hitting a high of 65 on Friday, but looks like they're closing green up a little bit. 35, so they're saying about 0.39. So about 11%, ending the day up at 11%. CVS flow, we had 11.15.70 calls, 1.34 million. Here's our flow. Again, 152 was the entry on Friday. About 10,000 contracts, but we did get a lot of volume on the day, so interesting to see how much of that carries over. Hitting about 148. They're saying about break even. We'll see how much comes over for that. Again, 39 days out. A little harder to digest that flow so far. And then we had more SMCI puts, 117.36. So here's your flow, 380, hitting a high of 410 same day. And it looks like that whale's mostly still in, so contracts up about 7.8%. Nothing major, but looks like that whale's still in, and that net put premium's really aggressive there. And DraftKings, our last one, 10-11-39.5 call. Here's our entry, 64. These hitting a high of 85, 32% on those. Look at the flow here. Again, IV staying up. Seeing that spot fill on the higher bid-ask spread. Looks like a buy, and we shot up at the end of the day. And again, just for those always asking, everything's always in here. I don't edit anything. We have our bid sides, our ETF flows, everything comes in here. Flow and charts is always updated daily if something looks good. But yeah, if anybody's ever interested in trying unusual whales or joining Stock Hub, both will be provided in the description below. Feel free to join, come learn, ask questions. That's what this is all about. Have a great weekend, everyone.